Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, September the 16th, 2025. There is a sextile aspect between Venus and Mars. This aspect should in theory be pretty good. I mean, sextiles are regarded, all things being equal, as being fortunate. Plus you've got Venus and Mars, this pair connected with relationships. Venus being a female principle, Mars a male principle. This pair are now coming together in a fortunate aspect. So, it does look good. And later in this video, I will be going into detail about the possible meaning of a sextile between Venus and Mars. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today at noon, Tuesday, September the 16th, set for New York. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So at noon, New York time, we have a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. So we started to get this conjunction yesterday on Monday, but now it's really exact. And the Moon-Jupiter conjunction is fortunate. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, it is considered to be, one of the best aspects in the book. And it's, you've got the moon, which is about process, how things are working, how things are coming together, how we're expressing ourselves. It's a very sort of emotional planet, and then it's conjunct Jupiter, planet of good fortune. So things really should be starting to move, and there should be plenty of opportunities to express ourselves. And furthermore, the moon and Jupiter are both in Cancer. So moon is in its own sign. Jupiter is in the sign of its exaltation. So that does indicate that things really should work well. Is it always going to work well, the conjunction between the moon and Jupiter in Cancer? You might say that it could exaggerate things. Emotions could get exaggerated. Feelings could get exaggerated. Now, that might be great. It's always good to be able to express our feelings in a constructive way, but feelings can sometimes be expressed in a more negative and perhaps angry way. So we shouldn't think that the Moon-Jupiter conjunction is going to be a positive force in all cases, but I think in most cases it should be. And aside from that, we have got a sextile between Venus and Mars. Now, if you are in the Americas, you might argue that sextile was late last night. So the Venus-Mars sextile is exact at 4 minutes past 4 in the morning London time. So that means that it would be exact at 4 minutes past 11 in the evening late on Monday, and even earlier if you're on the West Coast or in Alaska or Hawaii. So you could say that the Venus sextile Mars, it sort of straddles both sort of late Monday and sort of into Tuesday. But I'm going to talk about it today, which is Tuesday. And as I said in the introduction, Venus sextile Mars is a fortunate aspect. It should be good for relationships, getting on with people, and Venus and Mars can be about charm, charisma, attractiveness, and if we want to get people onto our side, or if we want to attract their attention, then with Venus sextile Mars there should be a way of doing it. And it is more interesting than that, because if you look at the chart, you notice that Mercury is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and this reminds us that there are two other aspects. Late on Monday if you're in the Americas, or Tuesday if you're in Eurasia or Australasia, you've got Mercury semi-sextile Venus and Mercury semi-sextile Mars. So semi-sextile is a 30-degree aspect, and so two semi-sextiles, you add them together and you get a sextile. And so there you see it. Mercury, Venus, Mars, all at around sort of 26, 27 degrees of the sign. And so that means we've got Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And, that is probably, pretty good. Reinhold Ebertin, in his book, The Combination of Stellar Influences, I must emphasize, this is a great book to have. If you've got any interest in midpoints, and it also gives very short descriptions of the planets in the signs and planetary aspects. But Reinhold Ebertin says about Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, he says, Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, thinking influenced by the love impulse, the tendency to delve into the problems of sex relationship, actors, writers of love stories, thoughts of love and marriage, thinking of progeny. So he's perhaps taken a very literal view of Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, and perhaps he's being a little too specific. I think that Mercury is the way we communicate, and it's also the way we think. So Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint just may say something about what we say. And with Mercury making this aspect, it could be that we can be very clever with words. We can use our words to get attention and to get people to like us. And so on a verbal basis, well, don't hold back. There are things to be said, and if we're trying to persuade someone that we're right, then now might be our chance. Of course, from a perspective of relationships, you could say that it's about smooth talking, charming, using words to attract someone into our web. Of course, it works both ways, doesn't it? Other people can use words to attract us for whatever reason. It might be because they're looking for money. It might be salespeople. So we do perhaps have to be a bit careful if we're under a lot of pressure. If someone is really turning on a charm to get something out of us. So that could be a manifestation of Mercury on Venus-Mars midpoint. Aside from that, the moon is making a sextile to the sun. So the moon, having made a conjunction to Jupiter, moves on, sextile to the sun. As I always say, great aspect, moon sextile the sun. It's a harmonious aspect. Moon in Cancer, sextile sun in Virgo. Cancer and Virgo are two signs that relate to each other pretty well. Yet, right at the end, the moon, having made its sextile to the sun, it does make a square to Mars. And moon square Mars can provide a bit of an edge, and it's not necessarily such a harmonious aspect. So if you're dealing with people, if you're getting on with people, don't lose your concentration at the last moment. It may just be that something you say at the last moment or something they say at the last moment causes offense. So just be aware of that Moon-Mars square. So that's the picture for New York at noon. If we look at the picture for Sydney at noon as a representative of Australia and New Zealand, then at noon the moon is at 14 Cancer. So it is, it's earlier in the sign. I don't think that Moon-Jupiter conjunction is perhaps going to be quite as powerful, at least in the middle of the day, in the active part of the day, as it is in the Americas. But aside from that, I don't think that there's a huge difference between the experience of being in Australasia and being in the Americas or in Europe. But things might just happen a bit later. That's the only thing. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Earth at the center, so the Sun at the center of the solar system. And here we have a trine between Venus and Mars, sort of a heliocentric trine between Venus and Mars. So heliocentrically, Venus is at 1614 Cancer at noon, Mars is at 1617 Scorpio. So I think that just reinforces what we know already, the fact that there is a a sextile between Venus and Mars today. And, Venus and Mars, as I've said, as I will say, it's a very charming and charismatic aspect, and it's supported by the heliocentric chart. And all sorts of people are being charming and charismatic and persuasive. It's not just on a personal level, it's also on a collective level. So, that's really the main theme. There is an opposition aspect between Mercury and Neptune. That Mercury-Neptune opposition provides a different view, and Mercury is the planet of thought and how we're thinking, and if it's opposition Neptune, it just may be that someone is unsure of themselves, or is perhaps they are sure of themselves but they're being deceptive. But it's a heliocentric chart, and you could say that Mercury opposition Neptune in a heliocentric chart represents propaganda and people deliberately confusing the issue, for their own purposes, maybe for their political purposes. But those that manipulate are often being manipulated by their own delusions. So that may be a way in which Mercury opposition Neptune heliocentrically is working. So I'm now going to turn my attention to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, September the 16th, 2025. Aries. Today, Aries, things could be rather like yesterday, except more so. I mean, there isn't a huge difference between yesterday and today, except things are stronger, more intense. And so, yesterday I talked about the growing influence of a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. Well, this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, is now exact, especially if you're in the Americas or in Europe. And so an exact Moon-Jupiter conjunction, Aries, is a stabilizing influence. It allows you to relax and be perhaps comfortable with what you have. And so, there's no need to try too hard to get anything, because, if you're honest with yourself, Aries, you've got it all, and you don't have to go to the other side of the world to find it. So if you are looking for something, Aries, it's probably right in front of you. Okay, you might not recognize that it's right in front of you, but it probably is. So there's no need to be too restless, and you can just be yourself. And if you are yourself and you feel comfortable, then that's going to be reflected by how other people respond to you. And one aspect we do have today, we did have it yesterday as well, is a sextile between Venus and Mars. So Venus is sextile Mars, Mars is your ruler. And heliocentrically, we've got a trine between Venus and Mars. So this Venus-Mars energy should, really work for you. And, you can get on with people without having to try, without having to do anything. You don't have to flatter anyone. I mean, Aries is not a sign that is particularly fond of just flattery for the sake of it. You are, after all, sort of very honest. But, people will just like you, and you'll know how to sort of get the balance right. You've got to, of course, think about your own needs and push forward with your own needs, but not excessively. Remember, there's that Moon-Jupiter conjunction. You don't have to do anything really dramatic. It's more about preserving what you have, and you have a lot. Probably a lot more than you recognize. And so, there's no need to really push things, and you're able to come over as an exciting person, but without having to try. The Aries excitement You think about excitement as about sort of actions, bold suggestions. But from an Aries perspective, you can just give off this vibe of being exciting, being interesting. You're ready for anything. Even if nothing happens, it's the impression you give. And so at the moment, Aries, I think that you're able to give a very good impression, and all the while you're still thinking about how things could be better. You're not complacent today. And so because of this lack of complacency, you might be thinking, oh, you should be doing something, you should be doing more, you should be trying harder, but you're just fine as you are. And with this Venus sextile Mars, Aries, I think that any relationship you're in should go to plan. I mean, it should be relatively straightforward, and you do have the capacity to empathize, or give the impression of empathizing, being able to understand what other people want and what people are concerned about. And you can be encouraging as well, just through the energy you give. And it just may be just one word you say. Someone is worried, they're nervous about something, they're anxious, and you say something and it just puts everything in perspective. And so Aries, it looks like being a good day, maybe a 5-star day. Taurus, the big aspect is Venus sextile Mars, and I talked quite a lot about Venus sextile Mars yesterday. And so, today, Tuesday, it's just another day when Venus Mars sextile is really in play. And so Venus sextile Mars allows you to really be yourself and be appreciated for being yourself. You don't have to try. And if you want to just stay where you are, not feeling that you have to do anything in particular, well, that's fine. And so I'm pretty optimistic about the influence of this Venus Mars sextile. And as far as what you might want to do with the Venus Mars sextile, I mean, it could be that you want to use your natural charm. It's a very sort of Taurian charm. It's very specific. It's not necessarily a completely smooth charm. I mean, that's the sort of the Taurus charm. It's sort of it takes time to build up. People don't necessarily notice it immediately, but perhaps the longer they hang around with you, the more that charm starts to build up. And so, with this Venus sextile Mars, if you spend time with people, then you start to have more and more of an influence. And, if you want something done, you can get it done. Your suggestions might, to begin with, appear to fall on deaf ears, but eventually you just keep pushing the same point slowly. Then people start paying attention to you. And, in the end, they pretty much do what they're told. And likewise, at the moment, Taurus, you are pretty effective when it comes to words. I mean, I think you have been effective with words, for some time. And today, it's very easy to express your ideas and also to express your passion. If something is important to you, you can tell everyone. And you can tell everyone, not in a crazy way, not in an angry way, but just people understand what's important to you. And once they understand what's important to you, then, they're likely to, do things your way, as I've just said. But it's not a battle. It really shouldn't be a battle. And another aspect we have is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. It's a great conjunction between Moon and Jupiter, and it's happening at the same time as a Venus Mars sextile. And so with this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, it certainly says something about who you are and what the general vibe is, the kind of impression people get. And it's an impression that is easygoing, and it's not jarring. And so this is sort of more evidence that you're able to be yourself and be recognized for being yourself. And people are going to find you easygoing, and because of this, you shouldn't be afraid of entering into new conversations. I mean conversations in a real way. I know that the word conversation tends to be rather overused. You're part of a conversation, you're not part of a conversation. But I do mean that. So what I really mean, it's easy to get into conversations that may not be about anything important, but you can somehow just start talking, get involved with someone, get involved with what they're doing, take an interest, they'll take an interest in you, and it'll all be very easy and very straightforward. Gemini. Mercury is strongly emphasized at the moment, and the reason it's strongly emphasized is because it's making semi-sextiles to Venus and making a semi-sextile to Mars. And of course, Mercury is your ruling planet, and so that means that you're going to be influenced by these semi-sextiles. Now, there are several ways of looking at it, and it might be that you have to deal with a small challenge or a series of small challenges. So, we might want to break it up. Venus semi-sextile Mercury, Mars semi-sextile Mercury. And so to begin with, Gemini, you may be trying to align yourself. You're trying to be yourself, and you're thinking things through in that sort of Gemini way, and you've got an active mind, but there's a mismatch, an initial mismatch between, perhaps with Mercury semi-sextile Venus, a mismatch between the way you are thinking, the way you are planning, and what other people are doing, or perhaps how you are presenting your ideas in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. Sometimes you have an idea and you try to articulate this idea, but the form you use isn't great. It might be rather sort of rough and ready, and not, well, it might be rough, but maybe not ready. And so that's one possibility. So don't ignore presentation. Just a few minutes on presentation can make all the difference. I can talk. I just do not understand presentation, as I think you probably gathered by looking at these videos. And then you've got Mercury semi-sextile Mars. Again, a small challenge there. Sure, you have your ideas. You've got things you're thinking about, things you'd like to talk about. But Mercury semi-sextile Mars, how do you actually do it? How do you get it? How do you put it into action? How do you actually be assertive? That could be an issue. But these are semi-sextiles. These are not squares or oppositions or anything like that. These are principles you need to bring together. And these two semi-sextiles, Mercury semi-sextile Venus and Mercury semi-sextile Mars, they come together in the form of, Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, remembering that Venus-Mars are in sextile. And so it's important, Gemini, that at the moment that you absolutely don't doubt your ability to communicate, that you can communicate with pretty much anyone, and you can communicate with charm and attractiveness, I hope, being a Gemini, having my sun in Gemini. But you should, in theory, be able to communicate like this. And maybe the question is that you shouldn't be tempted to overthink it. That can be a problem with Gemini. You can overthink it, and you can think, well, hold on, you can't behave like this. you can't be seen to be making an effort to be charming or to be attractive, and you might overanalyze it, and that could mess things up a bit. But it is unnecessary. I think that fundamentally, Gemini, at the moment, you're really able to get your message across. People will listen to you. Don't be shy, and so that looks to me pretty good. And of course, from a sort of a relationship perspective, having Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, that does make you attractive. And if you're trying to get closer to someone, or you're trying to build bridges, or you see someone new that you're trying to get their attention, I think with Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, that's something that you very much can do. And talking about self-consciousness, I think this is important because one aspect that is starting to form is an opposition between Mercury and Saturn. And one way the Mercury-Saturn opposition might manifest is just feeling negative, feeling down about yourself, feeling you can't do it. And I must emphasize that this feeling is subjective. It's not real. You can do it. So don't allow yourself to ask too many questions about yourself. You're fine. Everything's working your way, or it should be working your way. And perhaps your biggest enemy might be your negativity. Though Mercury opposition Saturn, maybe you should be somewhat wary of authority figures. People that appear to have higher status than you, be higher up in the hierarchy. These kind of people, they can in certain situations get you down. And maybe today you shouldn't be in a position where you are taking orders from another person, where you are in a subordinate position. I mean, sometimes, maybe much of the time, we have to accept our position in the hierarchy. But today, not just today, I would have said, over the next few days, be very wary of that, and don't allow yourself to be pushed around. Although I'm not saying that you should be rebellious. There's always a way of dealing with people higher up in the hierarchy, people who claim to have some control over you. And perhaps one way of dealing with that kind of situation, is to use clever words. Cancer. There's no reason why it can't be a great day. The moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter, and this conjunction between the moon and Jupiter is it's a wonderful aspect. I mean, I talked about the moon-Jupiter conjunction yesterday. I mean, yesterday the moon-Jupiter conjunction was just applying; it wasn't exact, but now it's much closer, it's much stronger, and so Cancer, I think that you can feel the full benefits of this aspect. So with Moon and Jupiter, both in your sign, the Moon and Jupiter having a great relationship to each other, I think that you're going to be able to present yourself extremely well, and people are going to like you, and you're just going to fit in wherever you are, and at the same time, you'll have more than your fair share of good fortune. So if there's something you want to achieve, something you want to happen, and you've got a reasonable chance, or you think you've got a reasonable chance, then do take advantage of this conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate. One doesn't want to say something like, "Oh, with Moon-Jupiter conjunction, you're going to win the lottery." It's not quite like that. But if you have got a good chance and you see an opportunity, then you go for it. Don't hold back, because the Moon-Jupiter conjunction can really work in your favor. And this Moon-Jupiter conjunction is not the only thing going on. The Moon, having made a conjunction to Jupiter, it moves on to make a sextile with the Sun. Moon sextile Sun is an aspect which is about sort of togetherness, feeling comfortable. It's the male and female principles, is the yin and yang, are in balance. And in fact, talking about male-female principles, we have got Venus sextile Mars, Venus and Mars, male and female planets, Venus a female planet, Mars a male planet, they're in sextile. Likewise, Sun sextile Moon. So that really does suggest to me that, for most Cancerians, it should be a good day, and that you can take advantage, not just of the Moon-Jupiter conjunction, Moon sextile Sun, but also that Venus sextile Mars. And with the Venus sextile Mars, okay, it doesn't impact you directly. There are going to be other signs which I think are going to be more strongly impacted, but I think it's still going to be useful for you. And it could be useful in quite a practical way. You thinking about, what's important to you, what you need. You don't have everything, and if it's something you need, something you expect to be given, then Venus sextile Mars might help you to get it. And perhaps it's just a question of asking nicely. And now might be the time to do it. If you are asking for something, trying to get hold of something, perhaps it's something of financial value. There can always be problems, and there might be resistance, but on a day with Moon sextile Sun and Venus sextile Mars, maybe your chances of success are at a maximum. So really, Cancer, it's a day where you should take advantage of everything. And as far as your behavior is concerned, there's no need to be too pushy, to be too aggressive about it, and you mustn't be defensive unless it really is important to be defensive, because the Moon, although it is making a sextile to the Sun and it's making a conjunction to Jupiter, at the end of the day, especially if you're in the Americas, or perhaps Europe, I think not so much if you're in Australasia, but the Moon makes a square to Mars in the end. And so, Moon in Cancer making a square to Mars, it's possible that at some stage you become defensive about something which you really don't have to be defensive about. You get annoyed, it's not entirely perfect, and you push things too far, and that would spoil things, and it needn't spoil things. And so try, Cancer, as far as possible, to have a positive approach throughout the day, and to just tell yourself that you are lucky, that if there are any obstacles, people behaving not necessarily in the way you like, you don't have to get angry. You can just use the power of your personality, not just to smooth things over, but to resolve things in a way that is satisfactory for all parties. And you can look after your own interests, without spoiling things, without having to show any annoyance. Leo. It's another day, Leo, when you are fairly sort of enthusiastic. I think that you can see that things are working, and even if short term there may be some doubts, that in the end it's all going to be okay. And there's probably not a great deal that you have to do. I don't think you have to adopt a sort of a public role. I don't think that you have to be seen and heard if you want to just drift off. That's probably okay, but you don't want to take things too far. I mean, there are still things that you can use, and your optimism, it is quite personal. It's perhaps not something that you can always discuss, and part of you might think that it's unrealistic. If you have hopes for the future and they seem far-fetched, well, would you really want to talk about them? Because you might be afraid of being ridiculed. But no, if you start to think today that something might be possible, that you really can get something together, then I think your feelings and your feelings and your intuitions are absolutely correct. And it's not just about you, it's also about how you respond to other people, and you're capable of being optimistic and enthusiastic, and you can make people feel good about themselves, without having to try, and you don't have to make a big thing about it. Just by being yourself and just being in the background, being available if you're needed, if people need advice, say, ask you questions, you can give people a real boost, perhaps in a rather understated way, but it's still very real. And this is further facilitated by the fact that we have a sextile between Venus and Mars. So Venus is still in Leo. I mean, it's not going to be in Leo forever, but it's still there. I think it moves into Virgo on the 19th, which is 19th is in a couple of days' time. Venus will be in Virgo, but it's not there yet. Venus is still in your sign. It's making a sextile to Mars, and that just does give a boost to your charm. And it's a kind of charm that doesn't really require any effort. You can just, be yourself, and you can be quite self-contained, and people will find you just approachable, and there will be a certain warmth to you, which is going to sort of allow you to really position yourself, very well, not just today, but, into tomorrow, when the moon moves into your sign. So that's something that you can build on. And, another thing is that the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and moon sextile sun, it's a good aspect always, but when the moon is conjunct Jupiter and the sun is still making a sextile to Jupiter. I mean, it's not a very exact sextile to Jupiter, it's sort of 4 degrees orb, but that's quite a wide sextile. But because the moon is involved, the moon conjunction to Jupiter, sextile to the sun, that gives you a certain amount of good luck, and it might be practical. Then there may be a financial side to this sextile. So, if there's something you want, some financial matter that needs to be sorted out, then you can get it out of the way, and it can be done in quite a secretive way. You know what needs to be done. You don't have to sort of publicize what you're doing, but you can quietly take action, and your quiet actions, which perhaps no one else is aware of, can put your financial position on a secure footing, or at least on a more secure footing. Virgo. Mercury is making semi-sextiles to Venus and Mars, and these semi-sextiles, on the face of it, seem to be problematic. They're not problematic, of course, but on the face of it, it might feel that way. It may feel that things aren't entirely easy, that your relations with other people aren't too easy. What do you say? And how do you relate? Are you? And then you might be very self-conscious, thinking that you're trying too hard, and someone else might notice that you're trying too hard. And then Mercury is also semi-sextile Mars. You want to assert yourself, but you're not quite sure how, and you may start the day feeling out of place, but it's just temporary. And if we look at the wider picture, it's not just that Mercury is making those two semi-sextiles. it is the fact that Mercury is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So in the end, with Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, when it all comes together, and perhaps that's what today is all about, trying to find the right position for yourself and finding that place where you just feel good. And once you find that place, then yeah, things do come together, and you can be someone who is difficult to ignore, and someone who is really at the center of things. You can be in the center of things, and people are just going to like you. And that's because, yeah, Mercury is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint means that you can come over as someone who is, attractive, appealing. You might be able to give the impression that you've got something that other people want. Maybe it's your ideas. Maybe it's you yourself, because you are going to, all things being equal, come over as being sort of more desirable than usual. And what else can I say about Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint? Though it really is important, Virgo, that you don't doubt yourself. Mercury is applying to an opposition of Saturn, and Mercury opposition Saturn. Yeah, there are a number of ways in which this could work out, and you could say that it's a setback. There may be one particular thing that is just bothering you, and it's spoiling your good luck. That might be how you think about it, but it's important not to make this Mercury opposition Saturn more significant than it actually is. It's not Mercury opposition Saturn. It's not an unusual aspect. It happens pretty regularly. You survived. And so with this Mercury opposition Saturn, if you feel that something is a real negative, is not working out, don't take it too seriously. And maybe it's all about how you view it, sort of in a cognitive way. So cognitively, you could take something and regard it as being really, really bad, the end of the world. Or you could just regard it as being nothing, just something passing, and it'll be fine. Though you could also argue with Mercury opposition Saturn that Saturn represents another person. And it is possible. It might be that some of the good fortune of today is spoilt by another person's presence. And if this is the case, then you just need to act accordingly. It is true, for all of us, that some people are lucky for us and other people are not so lucky. And ideally, we should steer clear of people who appear to be unlucky for us. It is a strange thing that this luck between two people, it can sort of work in different ways. Some people, they are lucky for other people. So person A can be very lucky for person B, but person B can be very unlucky for person A. It can work like that. And perhaps you have to be aware of that dynamic with Mercury, as Mercury starts to make this opposition to Saturn. But I don't think you should dwell on it. I think you should dwell on the fact that Mercury is still in Virgo. It's in its own sign. It's on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And also the fact that there's a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. Yes, some people can be potentially unlucky for you, Mercury opposition Saturn, but other people can be lucky for you, Moon conjunct Jupiter. And generally speaking, the people who are going to be perhaps unlucky for you, or might be unlucky for you, don't take this too seriously, I'm probably exaggerating, but the people who might be unlucky for you are the people you're closest to. One-to-one relationships, for example. There may be someone that you can't avoid, but they're somehow dragging you down. But then on the other hand, Moon conjunct Jupiter might indicate that some of your friends, your acquaintances, people you meet every day, but you're not emotionally attached to them. Those kind of people, could be very lucky for you. So, as far as your social life is concerned, get the focus right. Focus more on the group rather than particular individuals, because the right group, being in the right social environment, that can make all the difference. Libra. Venus is sextile Mars. Well, it was sextile Mars yesterday. It's still sextile Mars. And from a heliocentric view, Venus is trine Mars. So Venus, as far as you're concerned, Libra, it's well placed and it's powerful. So you have to see Venus as being you and Mars as being sort of quite an energetic principle, and that can be about you really showing the world what you can do, and really not taking any nonsense from anyone. I mean, it is a time to be assertive. I mean, I don't think you do have to take any nonsense. I think that you're very clear about who you are and what you want, and your power should be absolutely obvious. And this does mean that you're going to be able to get through the day very well. And it's not just about getting through the day. I mean, it's also about making the most of the day and making the most of everyone you come across over the course of the day. I think that you're able to really come over very well. You can present yourself as someone who is interesting, and people want to know you, and you even have the chance to get in touch with people who are important, who could be influential. And that's because Venus is now starting to move towards a conjunction with Regulus, the royal star. So, Regulus can be about kings, queens, important people. I mean, who is important? Who do you regard as being important? But with Venus moving towards Regulus, this gives a further boost to your social life and the kind of people you can come across. So, don't limit yourself. Don't think that anyone is unapproachable, or they're too important for you to meet, or they're too overbearing. If there's someone you feel could help you for whatever reason, then you really try to get in touch with them. I'm not promising anything, but if there's any time when you can really impress another person, then I think it might be now. And also you're helped by a conjunction between Moon and Jupiter in Cancer. Okay, I'm kind of repeating myself a bit today because I'm really saying what I said yesterday, but you could argue that today, Tuesday, is like yesterday, Monday, except more so. And there is this conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter in Cancer. It's exact today. And so, with this conjunction, you can really give a good account of yourself. And, if there's something that you're trying to achieve, then I think, there is a very good chance that you can take giant steps forward towards its achievement. And you have the energy and you have the dynamism, because the Moon, having made a conjunction to Jupiter, it makes a square to Mars. I think this Moon square Mars, well, for some people, I think this Moon square Mars could be a problem, but I think you'll know how to handle it. I mean, the Moon is in Cancer, high-profile part of your chart. It's square Mars. Mars is in Libra, your sign, and so with Moon square Mars, you are able to be dynamic, and you are able to really, pursue your own interests. And if anyone is holding things up or is in your way, I think you'll find a way of sort of barging past them. Though with this Venus sextile Mars, I should say, but from a relationship perspective, Venus sextile Mars, it's a great aspect. So so relationships is another area in which can work for you, and you are popular. Perhaps you're more popular than you realize, and maybe some people really prize you, and they want to get your attention. And so, whatever you're looking for in relationships, then I think there's a good chance that you can find it, and you can really be impressive. So like yesterday, Libra, I think it is another really good day. Scorpio, there is a lot of talk about Venus and Mars. Well, at least a lot of talk from me, because the most important aspect today, like yesterday, was a sextile between Venus and Mars. And it's not just a sextile between Venus and Mars geocentrically, it's also a heliocentric aspect as well, because today the heliocentrically, Venus and Mars they're making an exact trine. And Venus and Mars as a pair are about getting on with people, or how one gets on with people. Does one get on with people badly or well? Well, it's a sextile. So with Venus sextile Mars, I think there's a good chance that you have the ability to be friendly and charismatic, and if you want to communicate with anyone, if you want to share your ideas, it can all happen. Of course, you might not want to take advantage of the opportunity. At the moment, with Mars in Libra, many Scorpios are feeling that it's not necessarily the time to be out and about. It could be a time when you're still in a stage of reflection. You're thinking about where things are heading, and you're not necessarily completely sure of yourself, and you don't necessarily want to commit, and there could be moments of indecisiveness. I'm not just talking about today, I'm talking about this whole period where Mars is moving through Libra. I mean, Mars is not going to stay in Libra for much longer. I mean, very soon Mars is going to go into Scorpio, and it's going to your sign. I mean, that is something to really look forward to. But still, at the moment, Mars is moving in late Libra, and there is a temptation to sort of hide. But with Venus sextile Mars, I don't think that is necessary. I think that it is a time when you need to make your presence felt. Maybe some people need you. You've got a lot to offer. But at the same time, maybe you need them. If you don't do anything now, then you could be missing a chance. And Venus is in Leo. Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Regulus. Regulus is the royal star, and so with this Venus sextile Mars, you have the opportunity to make connections, and these connections may be useful. They may relate to your ambitions. And so whatever your ambitions are, then making the right connections can be important. And if you make a special effort, Scorpio, then you can be seen. And okay, you might not want to be seen, but you can be seen, and you can make a real impression. And that's especially the case if you're working, or if you're doing anything that requires you to be sort of in the public eye, being in other people's eye. People can see you. You may have some responsibility that you might not necessarily want to fulfill that responsibility, but if you're in any position of responsibility, then you can really make the most of it. And so, Scorpio, it would be a shame if you didn't take advantage of this sextile between Venus and Mars. I mean, that's what I'm really saying. You really can make your presence felt, and not just for yourself and your benefit, but also for other people's benefit as well. And finally, Scorpio, I should say that your various relationships, if that's appropriate, if that's relevant, your various relationships should be able to, should prosper. Venus sextile Mars, and if you are involved in anyone, then you can perhaps take things to a new level, or you can show a new side to your personality. Or if there have been any recent problems between you and another person, then this Venus sextile Mars can really help. And as a final thought, as an absolutely final thought, with this conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter, don't think that you know everything. Don't think you've got all the answers. And new information, new knowledge, new experiences, new awareness, it's all available to you. And you've just got to be open-minded. Sometimes Scorpios can find it difficult to be open-minded. They might think that they've sorted everything out, but you've still got work to be done. There's still work to be done, and you should need to be open to new possibilities. And with this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, you might, at some stage today, just get a feeling that you're in touch with something else, and that it's not just a new possibility in some sort of vague general sense. It may be something quite cosmic, something quite spiritual, an awareness that you're perhaps able to take things to a new level. Yeah, you might be achieving some of your potential, but maybe not all of your potential. And perhaps with this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, you might be just encouraged to try a little bit harder and to be maybe not entirely satisfied with the way things are. And that's a good thing. If you're completely satisfied, then there's no movement, there's no progress. And if there are feelings of dissatisfaction, feelings that you could be doing things better, then I think that is a good thing. Sagittarius. There's no need to be too open. Sagittarius is an open-minded sign. That's how it's normally seen. I think that's actually too much of a generalization. There are some Sagittarians who are completely closed-minded, who think they've sorted everything out, particularly on a moral level. That's true. But as far as today is concerned, I don't think that you should be pressurized to completely be sort of open to all ideas, to be completely understanding of everything. No, you have your own views, and your own views, I won't say thought through, because that sounds too logical. You've just realized, it can be just a moment of realization where everything comes together, and you have your own views, and you perhaps are still in the process of developing them. And so if you want to keep things to yourself and keep a distance, Sagittarius, then you can. And I think that is absolutely okay. Though, do take into account what's happening around you. And I think that does matter. There are a lot of things going on a sort of an interpersonal level. People are doing things. Perhaps people you know well are doing things. People you're closely connected with, and you need to monitor what they're doing, and you also need to monitor their influence on you. Now, you might think that no one has any influence on you. Well, that would be untrue. People can influence you in many different ways, and so pay attention to the emotional dynamics around you. I mean, it might be the intellectual dynamics as well, but I think the emotional dynamics could be quite important. And a look at the way you might be being subtly manipulated, not just by individuals, but by sort of groups, by just things going on in a collective, perhaps by, what you look at on TV or on the internet. All of these things can influence you. And they're not going to have an influence on you provided you are aware of what's going on, or at least they're not going to have a negative influence on you, or you're not going to do things that you don't want to do if you come at things from a point of view of awareness. Now, if you are unaware that someone is trying to manipulate you, then they could end up manipulating you. And that really could happen. So Sagittarius, the more aware you can be, the better. And every conversation you have, there is a capacity to be influenced. Everything you watch on the internet has the capacity to influence you. And that might be a good thing, but at the same time, you might fall for something which turns out to be completely fallacious. So that could happen. And so I think that the main thing today is to be very aware, and perhaps also to be aware of sort of darker processes which are not necessarily very healthy. They could be undermining, or it could be people trying to deliberately manipulate for their own reasons. And it could happen. I'm not saying that it will happen, but it does mean that today is quite complicated. But if you completely take on board all of these complications, then I think it's all fine. I think that you can move from a position of confusion to one of total and utter awareness. I mean, it's not always easy. It's sometimes easier to be unaware. When ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. But I wouldn't really advocate that. I think that ignorance is not a good idea. And the more aware you are of everything, the better the position you're going to be in. And perhaps that's the real lesson of what you're experiencing at the moment. I mean, not when I say at the moment, I just don't mean just today. I'm talking, for example, about this whole process of Jupiter, your ruler, being in Cancer, being in a water sign. And it's not always easy, Jupiter being in Cancer, because you're having to deal with things and ways of being which don't always feel entirely comfortable. But it is the process, of awareness. Jupiter has this 12-year cycle, and that 12-year cycle, you as a Sagittarius, it really does matter. But this is a time when you need to be thinking about the complications around you, and not taking anything at face value. Capricorn. The question is, how much effort do you want to make? And I'm particularly thinking about other people, the world you have to deal with, or you might have the opportunity to deal with. Now, some Capricorns may be of the view that they don't really want to do anything. Why should they? I mean, you've perhaps done what you need to do, and today maybe there doesn't seem to be much going on, or much going on that you necessarily want to involve yourself. But I think it is worth making an effort, particularly in a social sense. This is because there is a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter in Cancer, in your opposite sign, and the moon is making a sextile aspect to the sun. And indeed, Venus is making a sextile aspect to Mars. So when you put all these aspects together, then we get the impression that there's a lot Capricorn can do to get noticed and to have an influence. With that Moon-Jupiter conjunction, it is a great aspect, and it can relate to benefiting from other people, perhaps even benefiting from other people's generosity. So if you want to benefit from another person's generosity, well, you've got to put yourself in the right position. Of course, generosity isn't just about money or giving you things necessarily. It can be about giving you advice. It can be about giving you support. It can just be about just having good people around you. So don't think, Capricorn, that you need to do everything on your own. Help is available if you want to take advantage of it. And additionally, with this Venus sextile Mars, potentially that Venus sextile Mars, such an important aspect, this Venus sextile Mars today. And this Venus sextile Mars can be about your ability to be charming. I mean, I say this word charming to a lot of the 12 signs. We all can be charming, but perhaps you have to think about how you can be charming. And it might be, for example, Capricorn, that there are things that you really, really want to achieve. It is a time when Capricorns deep down are ambitious. And if you want to achieve something, you can certainly achieve it, but you may be able to best achieve it with another person's help. And so seeking support is should nothing to be ashamed of. You absolutely do not have to do everything on your own. It really is unnecessary. And in fact, it's more than that, Capricorn. It may be the lesson of Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is in Cancer, your opposite sign. It went into Cancer earlier in the summer, and Jupiter will stay in Cancer until June of next year. And so Jupiter is the planet of expansion, where perhaps your energy is best placed. And with Jupiter in Cancer, you shouldn't be trying to do everything on your own, and help and support are definitely available. And I think that is an important theme of today. You can get that support. It is there for you. And with this sort of emphasis on the social side of things, it's kind of not surprising that relationships can be quite successful. You can find ways of relating to people that perhaps you hadn't fully appreciated. And so don't give up on anything. Don't give up on anyone. Everyone has got a role to play, or at least a lot of people have got a role to play. And just because someone has disappointed you in the past doesn't mean that they're going to disappoint you in the future. And additionally, Capricorn, don't underestimate your own persuasiveness. And if you want to persuade someone to do something, to believe something, or to believe in you, I think that you can. And if deep down you regard another person as being important to you, then go with that. And if you want to bring someone sort of into your sort of sphere of influence, I think you can. And there is a lot of manipulation flying around at the moment. There is this Venus sextile Mars, and of course Venus trine Mars heliocentrically. But if you want to be, you can be a manipulator yourself. And manipulation, sounds bad, but sometimes it's necessary to manipulate, to create a situation where another person is drawn your way. Because as I've just said, you don't have to do everything on your own. And if you need help, perhaps in a subtle way, you can demand help. You don't have to make a direct demand, but you can create a situation where you get the assistance you need. Aquarius, there may be times when you regard it all as being pointless. It's a temporary phase. and you may just be thinking, why are you doing what you're doing? Where is it going? And you kind of know that there are things you should be doing, but you don't really want to do it. And you're thinking, where is it going to lead? And you can't see necessarily the drama of the situation. And, it's always good when you've got drama, because when you've got drama, that can be motivating. But today just seems a bit tedious, and you kind of need to get over that. And perhaps the best way of getting over it is to do one thing after another, and decide what is the most important thing to do. Or perhaps it's deciding what is the least unimportant thing to do. That might be a better way of phrasing it to yourself, and just doing it. And to begin with, I'm not convinced that you'll have a great deal of commitment, but if you keep doing it, if you keep going, then slowly I think that things will come together. And at the same time, Aquarius, you may start to recognize that you have some kind of an influence over other people. It's not an immediate influence. It takes time to build up. But if you keep doing things in the same way, you just keep going, and you make some effort to be available, to be around, then you will be noticed. And after a while, things will change, and you can create a situation that really isn't so bad. And so don't give up on today right at the beginning. I think that today can be okay, and you can get a reasonable amount of things done. And additionally, as I think I suggested yesterday, is that do think about your health and well-being. It matters, of course it matters. Sometimes you can be sort of thinking about something else, and as I did say yesterday, your body matters, and from a perspective of not just a physical sense, but also your psychological and spiritual sense, it does matter. And there are certainly things you can do to make yourself feel fitter, happier, and healthier. And the things that you can do may, on the face of it, seem rather boring and routine, and you don't really want to do it because you've got other things to think about. But you do it, you do something, and you don't get an immediate reward. So you're thinking, well, what is the point? But again, if you keep going, you will get the rewards, and those rewards can be in terms of just how you feel about yourself. So don't be tempted to be overly negative. Don't be tempted to do nothing. And just because you don't get immediate satisfaction from something, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. And additionally, the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and Venus is making a sextile to Mars, and this does link up with other people. Venus is in Leo, your opposite sign. It's sextile Mars, and the sun is ruler of Leo, and it's sextile the moon, and that really does indicate that you shouldn't feel that you're alone, and you should be bothered to reach out and see who else is available. And once you actually start to be with people, then I think that might cheer you up, and you might have a more sort of positive approach. And maybe that's what it's all about. I suggested that at the beginning of the day you might not have much enthusiasm, and perhaps what you need to give yourself enthusiasm is company. It doesn't have to be a lot of company. I'm not suggesting that you give over the whole day to other people and their needs and interests. It's not like that, but just always having a connection with the social world today. I mean, that really could be important. Pisces. Moon is making an exact conjunction to Jupiter. I talked about that aspect yesterday. I mean, this is the problem about doing daily horoscopes, that when I do daily horoscopes, what happens one day is not necessarily going to be so different from what happens the next day. So that does mean that to an extent I may repeat myself. That is the advantage of just focusing on weekly horoscopes or monthly horoscopes, because a weekly horoscope or a monthly horoscope is more likely to be unique. So, yesterday I talked about Moon-Jupiter conjunction. Well, that Moon-Jupiter conjunction is still there. And in fact, it's closer than today. So today could be even better than yesterday. Well, I hope yesterday was okay for you. But that Moon-Jupiter conjunction, Pisces, can give you a great sense of who you are and what you enjoy, and you do make the most of everything. And additionally, you don't have to worry too much about what other people are thinking. You can do things in your own way, and that's not being selfish. It's just recognizing that you have been given certain things, and perhaps you've been given them at birth, but now you've been given them, and now you want to make the most of them. And perhaps that's what this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, is all about. And it sort of picks up on the fact that Jupiter is in Cancer. Jupiter's your ruler. It's in Cancer. It's in a water sign, and it's a time to be feeling your own power and your own creative pulse. And I think that the Moon-Jupiter conjunction can very much help you there. And additionally, the Moon makes a sextile to the Sun. And so with the Moon sextile Sun, you can be appreciated by other people. You can perhaps share some of your experiences, but not share them in such a way that you have to change what you're doing because you've got to take into account someone else. You don't. I mean, it's very much a one-way thing. If people want to share what you're experiencing, what you're enjoying, they can, but you don't have to stop what you're doing and consider another person's needs or another person's desires. It's not like that. And it's all about you, and it's all about enjoying yourself, and it's also perhaps about enjoying other people's company. I mean, it is a pretty good day, and I think most things should work. And thinking about other people, Mercury is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Mercury is a planet that in the Pisces chart has a connection with relationships, and so with Mercury. Well, Mercury is making a semi-sextile to Venus, it's making a semi-sextile to Mars. Mercury is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and Mercury is in Virgo, your opposite sign. And so this could be looked at in a number of ways. It could be a person who is charming, who's used to getting their way, who's persuasive, and someone who is maybe trying to undermine you. I mean, I'm looking at it in the most negative way possible. So if you're asked to do something, someone asks you to do them a favor, and they ask you in a very persuasive way, well, you might be tempted to drop what you're doing and give them what they want. That's not the right way of handling it. Or likewise, Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, someone using their persuasiveness to trick you, deceive you. It could be a cold caller, for example. So that would be a negative way of looking at it. But a more positive way would be perhaps someone you already know who shows a new side to their personality, perhaps shows their charm, and perhaps you'd had your doubts about them, but you see another side to their personality, and you like what you see, but you still have your doubts because Mercury is opposition Saturn. But if you know that someone is trustworthy, if you know they're trustworthy, if you know that they respect you and they respect who you are, and what makes you special. If you know all of that, then do give them a chance. And don't just ignore what they're doing, or just be so focused on your own interests that you just can't see what they're trying to say to you, or what they're trying to present. And if they have respect for you, and if you trust them to be respectful to you and your identity, then do give them a chance. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 16, which is contentment. Now that's interesting, because when I did the I Ching for yesterday, Monday, I also got contentment. Contentment was the second hexagram, but now it's the first hexagram. So maybe sort of Monday, Tuesday, contentment is a theme. Now, this word contentment, should not necessarily be seen in a positive light. It can be complacent. And, we might just think that everything's going to be fine. Okay, we know that it might not be fine, but don't worry about it. This hexagram can be about sort of kicking the can down the road. We're not going to worry about it now. We know we're going to have to deal with it at some stage, but, let's not worry about it. So there is potentially that problem. And also, we may find that we have too much faith in our own abilities, and it may not just be us, it may be other people having too much faith and thinking we've got everything sorted out. And there may be times during a day, particularly the beginning of the day, when we are complacent, when we think we've got everything sorted out, when we might even have a touch of arrogance, being so sure that everything's fine. We just there's nothing to worry about. We're great. We're good. I'm good, as they like to say, and that's not a good start. And as the day progresses, things do change. We're perhaps not quite so complacent, and perhaps we're able to do some work on ourselves, and we're perhaps able to fine-tune our attitude to what's going on, and maybe we start to open our eyes a little to what problems might be just around the corner. And this does give us a greater sense of confidence. And on a really most positive note, contentment can also be seen as being enthusiasm. The Wilhelm translation of this hexagram, he calls it enthusiasm. So it's not just enthusiasm about what we're doing, but we can show enthusiasm for what other people are doing. And this probably relates to the fact, or is certainly maybe linked to the fact that there's a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter in Cancer. And so Moon Jupiter in Cancer, for certain, is an enthusiastic aspect. It's a very fortunate aspect. And so on the most positive note, we can show an interest in what other people are doing. People might have their doubts. They might not be sure of themselves, but we can show enthusiasm, we can show an interest, and, we can make people's lives better. And so that looks good. But then we get the fifth line. Now, the fifth line in a hexagram is usually pretty good, but this fifth line is, it talks about being constantly ill but not dying. Now, don't panic. This is just a hexagram for one day. And so, what does that mean? I mean, you could say that it's positive because we're just we're just so ill that we don't die. Now, that doesn't necessarily make sense, but it could be that we're just brooding on something. Maybe that's the illness. We're stuck on something and we're thinking about it. Maybe the illness is our own complacency. That's what it's talking about. We just end up being incredibly complacent, thinking that it's all okay, and fundamentally we are stuck. We're just stuck in a place that we just don't want to be, but we don't know how to get out of it, and it's just going nowhere. And in the end, there could be a great feeling of stagnation. And so this hexagram contentment doesn't really end very well. It doesn't end disastrously because we don't die, but it is all stagnant and complacent. And so this moves to a new hexagram, and in the circumstances I would regard that new hexagram as being quite positive, and that is hexagram 3, which is difficulty at the beginning. So perhaps at some stage in the day there is like a new start. We do have a chance to look at things again and realize that things aren't great. Maybe the problems that we were avoiding at the beginning of the day start to become real, and we realize actually things aren't so easy, and we're in the middle of starting a venture, and we kind of know that it's just not going to be easy. We thought it was going to be easy. Perhaps we were complacent, but as soon as we start to embark on something, the problems start to mount up. And this is difficulty at the beginning. It's not saying difficulty at the end. There are ways to resolve the issue, and that's difficulty at the beginning. So there is a message of optimism here. So if by the end of the day you feel that nothing is happening, nothing is going your way, don't worry. This is just the beginning of a process, and it seems that there is a possibility that you can get assistance, help, advice, or you can have another look at it yourself and try a different approach, and find the right way of doing things. So perhaps a somewhat complicated day, but you will survive. And now I want to look at the Venus-Mars sextile. So today, or perhaps yesterday, there is a sextile between Venus and Mars. So here is the chart for the Venus sextile Mars. So this sextile between Venus and Mars takes place London time at 4:04 in the morning on Tuesday. So that means that if you're in New York, that would be 4 minutes past 11 on Monday evening, or if you're in California, that would be 4 minutes past 8 on Monday evening. But I mean, let's not get too sort of caught up with this, with the timing of it. And as I've said, this Venus-Mars sextile, on the face of it, is fortunate. It is a sextile. I mean, sextile is a fortunate aspect, and things should work quite well. I mean, it's not necessarily a fully easy aspect, because it's 6 is 2 times 3, so you've got 2 is kind of representative of an opposition. 3 is representative of a trine, so it's kind of a mixture of a trine and an opposition. It's like you have to put in a bit of effort. That's for 2, in order for things to move, which is the 3. So that's the sextile aspect. So with Venus sextile Mars, we can get on with people. We can push forward with our agenda, especially on a social level. It's not going to be 100% easy. We have to put in a bit of effort, but it's not like a square or an opposition. The effort will be rewarded, and this applies not just to us, but it applies to other people. It's how we can push our message, how we can get on with people. Of course, the Venus sextile Mars, Venus is the planet of female sexuality, Mars a planet of male sexuality, and so from a relationship perspective, it's generally considered to be quite a fortunate aspect. So if you're reading sort of a daily sun sign column, you will see reference to this Venus sextile Mars sort of here, there, and everywhere, particularly if Venus and Mars are ruling the relevant sign. So if you are a Libra and you read your sun sign forecast for today, it's going to say something about relationships, perhaps about sexuality or something like that, because of that Venus sextile Mars. And this is simply how traditionally, how it's seen. I mean, and it kind of would make sense. But are there other ways of looking at this Venus sextile Mars? It's tempting to see a sextile as being a fortunate aspect, but it may just be an aspect. It may be a connection. And so it might be Venus being affected by Mars. I mean, it could be Mars damaging Venus. And that's especially the case if you're thinking about events. And so Venus sextile Mars, you could say that on a positive note, it says something about women. Okay, it could say something about Mars, because Venus and Mars is, why would I focus on the Venus? I should be focusing on the Mars as well. But it could say something about gender differences, but there is a connection there. It's working well, and it could be about sort of marriages. And so it's a great time for creating unions. But what is given away in those unions, and is that union always going to work? So I think the best way of looking at this then might be to start off by considering some events that took place at the time of Venus sextile Mars. And then I want to look at some people who've got Venus sextile Mars in their charts. And so thinking about events, well, I'm not saying this has anything to do with Venus sextile Mars, but I'm just pointing this out anyway, is that Ceausescu, was he the president of Romania? So he was sort of executed when Venus was sextile Mars. Him and his wife were executed when Venus was sextile Mars. You can see that Venus was in Aquarius and Mars was in Sagittarius. And maybe in a strange way, that's kind of fitting. So if you look at the executions chart of Ceausescu, you had Mars was in Sagittarius, on the 7th house cusp. I mean, that's quite an sort of an angry combination, or an angry thing to see. And Mars, Mars on an angle, does indicate violence. It can indicate violence. So this happened on Christmas Day, 1989, I think, and so Venus sextile Mars, him and his wife dying together. That's one way of looking at it, isn't it? And then we've got a few weddings. I mean, Prince Charles and Diana got married with Venus sextile Mars. So here's the chart, of the marriage, and that's great, isn't it? I mean, for a marriage, for Venus to be sextile Mars. I mean, we had Mars in Cancer, Venus in Virgo. So when you've got Venus sextile Mars, what can be better? And you can see how astrologers, when electing the time for someone to get married, might look at that Venus sextile Mars. It got so much attention, that royal wedding in 1981. But maybe that Venus sextile Mars just says something about the event. It doesn't say anything about what happens later on in the marriage. There are other things to consider. Maybe it didn't help the fact that Venus was in Virgo. I mean, Venus was fallen in Virgo, and that maybe says that might be, maybe that says something about Diana, and also Mars in Cancer. So yes, you've got Venus sextile Mars, but you've got Mars fallen in Cancer, sextile Venus fallen in Virgo. So maybe this is an example of a situation where you should perhaps be looking at the signs as well. So you've got two fallen people coming together at a moment in time, getting married, and after that, it was all downhill. And there is another royal wedding which took place with a Venus sextile Mars, and that was the wedding of Gabriella Windsor. I can't remember offhand what makes her royal, what her precise connection was, but she was a senior royal, or she is a senior royal, a relatively senior royal, and she got married to a man who I think he later shot himself. I think that was quite recently he shot himself. So that was the wedding had the marriage had a really tragic ending, and of course you could say, well, in this case you had a full moon, you had moon in Scorpio, you had opposition sun in Taurus. That's something you should never do. Getting married on Scorpio full moon. I mean, that is really asking for trouble. And Venus was in Taurus, and Mars was in Mars was in Cancer. So Venus in Taurus, that's a nice place for Venus to be. But Mars in Cancer, that could indicate that Mars in Cancer might say something about the groom and his own issues, which eventually led to his suicide. And so you're getting a picture, that Venus sextile Mars with these weddings. I mean, it can talk about a great day, but how's it all going to develop? And then Venus sextile Mars. I mean, I suggested that it might indicate women being sort of prominent in the news. So Janis Joplin, the death of Janis Joplin, I mean, she died, I think, of a heroin overdose. I think this is the approximate time of Janis Joplin dying. And so she has, at the time of her death, Venus was in Scorpio and Mars was in Virgo. So, again, Venus was in Scorpio. Venus was not in a great sign. Venus was in its detriment in Scorpio. So when Venus sextiles Mars, that could be that Mars might just represent death. I mean, or something bad happening to her. But she died of a drug overdose. It wasn't like she was a victim of violence. And maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. And other women who died on Venus sextile Mars. Remember the Kennedy crash in 1999. So the Kennedy, I think one of the sons of John F. Kennedy, he was flying with his wife and his wife's sister in a private plane, and he really didn't have the knowledge or experience or the licensing to be doing a particular. It was a night flight, and he went into the sea, and everyone was killed. And that took place with Venus in Virgo, sextile Mars in Scorpio. So perhaps if we get, we go back to Diana's wedding, that was when Venus was in Virgo. So Venus sextile Mars. Well, Mars was in the 8th house at the time of that crash, but Venus was not, was perhaps not helped by that sextile to Mars. 2 women killed in that accident, and a final event which took place in 1967 was the death of Jane Mansfield. So Jane Mansfield, she was an incredibly famous movie star at the time, and she was something of a sex symbol. I don't really know much about Jane Mansfield, but I know she had had a car crash. I think, was she beheaded in the car crash? I think it was really bad. And so here, well, that's a chart. That's Jane Mansfield's chart. And Jane Mansfield, she had Venus in late Aries, and it was sextile. She had Venus sextile Mars. So Mars was, although Mars is in Virgo, she had a quite close trine between Venus and Mars. So you could say that Jane Mansfield, with a Venus-Mars trine in her chart, well, that Venus-Mars trine should have helped her in her career, helped her, be a sex symbol. And then, as far as the accident is concerned, so here's a chart of her death, and so Venus and Mars were sextile. So Mars was at 21 degrees Libra, and Venus was at 21 degrees Leo. So a very close Venus-Mars sextile. So you would have thought that close sextile would be something fortunate, but no. And it just could be that Venus in Leo, perhaps was symbolic of her, and Mars was the accident, and Venus sextile Mars. And why is that relevant? Well, at the time, she was a big star. Okay, perhaps her career was beginning to wane a little, but she was still a big star, and that was a big event. Okay, it wasn't quite on the level of Marilyn Monroe dying, but I think it kind of fits Venus sextile Mars, and perhaps is reminding us not to necessarily regard the sextile as always being a fortunate aspect and looking at sort of good things. I mentioned in my last video, the fact that we've got Uranus sextile Neptune, and there was Uranus sextile Neptune at the time of the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And of course, as we've got Uranus sextile Neptune, we've just seen the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I think that one still has to be aware of this Uranus sextile Neptune. Late in 1968, there were 2 assassinations. Maybe, there could be another assassination. We have to be careful with this Uranus sextile Neptune. It is a sextile, though maybe that's it. I don't think we want to read too much into this Uranus sextile Neptune. Maybe things will calm down, but I'm not sure. And then there are people with who have it in their horoscope, and I just want to focus on 2 old favourites. Why not? And that would be Harry and Meghan. And it's not because I'm particularly interested in them, as you know, and I haven't talked about Meghan for ages. So I think I'm allowed to briefly mention Harry and Meghan. So looking at Harry's chart. So Harry has Venus sextile Mars. And so Harry has Venus in Libra, sextile Mars in Sagittarius. So Venus sextile Mars, you might say that gives him charm and maybe sex appeal. And there was certainly a time where Prince Harry was the most popular royal. and people were thinking, there was a time when people thought that Prince Harry would make a better king than Prince William. I can remember, it was a long time ago. I mean, I was kind of wasting my time. It was some online tabloid newspaper, and there was a comments section on it, and there were always comments about how Harry would be a better king than William. And I put a comment saying, I disagree with this. I don't agree with that at all, whatever. And I just looked and I got completely downvoted. So that's just a reminder of how things have changed. Of course, that's a very anecdotal example. But there was a time when he was the most popular member of the royal family. And, now can we really see that Venus sextile Mars? He doesn't seem to be particularly charming or charismatic, right now. But, he married a woman who also had Venus sextile Mars. And, I think that in the case of Meghan, perhaps her Venus sextile Mars is more obvious. So Meghan has, if we look at Meghan's chart, she has Venus in Virgo, sextile Mars in Cancer. So I think that she's able to use that Venus sextile Mars. I mean, she certainly used that Venus sextile Mars in terms of getting Harry's attention. And I think it probably helped the fact that he had Venus sextile Mars. So two people who both have Venus sextile Mars are going to be potentially attracted to one another, or at least one of them is going to be attracted to the other. And that seems to be the case with Harry. And so what are the consequences of two people both having Venus sextile Mars? What does that mean? Well, you could ask, what does that mean mathematically? And mathematically, what it means is that if you set up a composite chart for Harry and Meghan, because their Venus and Marses are both have the same angular separation, that does mean that you will have in the composite chart a Venus-Mars conjunction. So here is the composite chart for Harry and Meghan, and this comes about, as I've just said, because they both have Venus-Mars sextiles. And so you can see that in that composite chart. Remember how you work out a composite chart. So you would take Harry's sun, Meghan's sun. You find a midpoint between the suns. That's the composite sun. You do the same through Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and so that's how you create the composite chart. And so their composite chart, you've got in the composite chart, Mars at 29 Virgo, Venus at 0 degrees Libra. And of course, what are you thinking? Well, it means that I think their relationship and their marriage is going to be under huge pressure at the moment. Huge pressure. Because Saturn and Neptune are making this conjunction in Aries, and so Saturn and Neptune are going opposition their Venus-Mars conjunction. It's been happening over the summer, and Saturn and Neptune do go retrograde. They move away, but then sort of next year, Saturn and Neptune will be hitting this point all over again. So there is a lot of pressure there, and we should not forget the full moon eclipse coming up, I think, on September the 21st. So that full moon eclipse is at 29, sorry, not full moon eclipse, I mean a new moon eclipse. The new moon eclipse on September the 21st is at 29 Virgo. And this new moon eclipse is therefore going to be on the composite Mars, and it's going to be pretty close to the composite Venus. So looking at that composite chart and those two sextiles, and the fact that Venus-Mars conjunction happens mathematically because they both have Venus sextile Mars, we can see the kind of problems that their relationship might have to face, not just now, but over the next year. So anyway, that's all I've got to say about the Venus-Mars sextile. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.